All right, if I could have everybody take their seats. Before we get started here, I just need to make an announcement for the youth in the room. We are going to meet at lunchtime to discuss the youth panel tomorrow. I don't know if the youth can hear us, thank you. So the youth delegates from each province, if you can come and meet Jen and myself up here right before we break for lunch, we can have a quick little meeting and then grab our lunch and talk about the youth panel. So youth, come and meet us at lunch.
And just another follow-up to lunch, can everybody from the resolution committee please raise their hand high and wave? Resolution committee. Okay, look around the room, everybody. See your friends. And at lunch, if you guys could meet at the back table just to figure out what time you guys would like everyone to get their resolutions into you so that we can notify everybody after lunch. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, it looks like everybody's in the room now for the most part. So I would like us to start with moving on to our finances. So I would like to invite spokeswoman Anita Campbell to provide her treasurer's report and our auditor from Myers-Norris Penny Assurance Services team to present the 2018-2019 audited financial statements. Can we give them a round of applause?
Go ahead. You can talk. Keep talking. I just gotta do something.
Thank you for that, Genevieve. At least I know I got one round of applause. We're having IT issues.
I wouldn't call it issues.
They're issues.
No.
IT people tend to not want to admit when they have IT issues. There we go. We're good? Nope.
Now it's issues.
Everybody has a copy of the audit, correct? Yes? Raise your hand if you don't. Melanie just rose her hand up. You have a copy, right? You got it? Okay, good. She knows it by heart anyways. So she's good. See? We're doing, here we go. Anyway, what I'll do is I will make a couple opening remarks, and then I will introduce the auditor or the auditing company, and then we'll go through the audit, and then we'll open the floor for questions, and then I'd like to make a couple closing remarks. So with that, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to present your 2018-2019 audit. And we actually, the board, if you'll notice, there's signatories on it. So myself and I think Melanie had signed off on the audit. It went through the board. So process is that this audit is reviewed by and presented by your LFMO board. And so that's part of what we were doing yesterday morning, is reviewing the audit, going through any of the areas that we needed corrections or clarification on, and then sign them off, made the copies, and we are now presenting you with the audit. It's a good audit. It's actually, thank you. It actually is a little bit better financially than last year, and that's actually where LFMO wants to go, is upward and onward, right? And so this is going to provide some of that funding that we've always wanted to move forward. So I just wanted to let you know that some of the processes that we've had, there are discussions that we're having also at the board level with respect to, no different than some of the other things that we're trying to do, is develop some policies around our finances. And to also, so those will be brought forward through the board, because it's not an assembly issue where it is more an administration issue that the board needs to deal with. But just letting you know that we will be looking at developing some board policies and processes around different ways for us to do some of the work that you've assigned us or we've indicated that we wanted to do. So I just wanted to let you know that there is additional financial work that's coming this year, and then there'll be a report back, of course, for next year with respect to what has been achieved. So with that, I'm going to open the floor then for James Melnick is his name. He's from Myers-Norris Penny. They are a firm that operates throughout Canada And so our auditor is Terrell Lahoy, and he was with us last year in Toronto and presented the audit then. What we try to do is make sure that wherever our meetings are in, that we have, because that was one of the directions that you had provided us, was that wherever we're situated, that the auditor is there to present the audit. And so we've been trying to do that now for the last few years, where there's actually the auditor with us to present the audit of the work that they've provided. So with that, I'm going to ask James if he can kind of walk you through the audit. Then we'll open the floor for questions once he's done. So, James?
Good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to stand in front of this group. The audited financial statements have been distributed, and before I get into the numerical aspect of them, I'll just briefly comment with respect to the audit itself. Our auditor's opinion, it takes up the first 2 pages as the letter kind of prefacing the financial statements. It's what we call a clean audit opinion, which means that we're comfortable in stating that these are a fair representation of the financial position and the operations for the year ended March 31st, 2019. When we conduct an audit, what we're doing as auditors is we're verifying the numbers that are within the income statement or on the balance sheet by testing items, ensuring accounts are reconciled, discussing issues with management to make sure that the financial statements are a fair presentation of the operations, looking and reviewing internal controls and policies and procedures to ensure that they're operating as designed. So when we end up with a clean audit opinion, it means that we're satisfied as auditors that these financial statements and the processes in place to produce these financial statements are working as they should. The first statement is the statement of financial position, or is commonly known as the balance sheet. The first section is the assets of the organization. At year end, there were $612,752 of assets held by the organization. Of that, $225,000 was held in cash. $150,000 was receivables. Of that, $100,000 was due from Indigenous Services Canada and $50,000 from the Ontario Friendship Centres. Both amounts have been received in the subsequent 6 months. There was $114,708 due from the Métis National Council Secretariat and $120,000 of GST receivable. On the liability side, accounts payable were $32,000. These are bills which have been received or services that have been incurred but not yet paid for, compared to $101,000 last year. $109,000 is due back to the Métis National Council Secretariat, and deferred revenue was at $283,000 compared to $546,000. Deferred revenue consists of funding received for the next fiscal year that was received prior to the fiscal year end, March 31st, 2019. So this $283,000 is funds available for expenditure over 2019-2020 fiscal year. It just was received before the end of the fiscal year. Similarly, the $546,000 at the end of last year was received prior to March 31st, 2018 and was expended this year on this year's current year programs. The net assets is $187,109. Net assets are really the equity of the organization, a significant improvement from last year's equity of $12,000. Net assets really represent residual earnings accumulated over a period of time. So it's positive that these balance is increasing in order to generate funds for long-term sustainability of the organization. The second statement is the income statement or statement of operations. Total revenue for the year was $1.711 million. Of that, nearly $1.1 million comes from Indigenous Services Canada. $150,000 is from Status of Women Canada, and $100,000 is from the Métis National Council, as well as just various other funding sources, as you can see listed on the screen. We did recognize $546,000 of funding received in 2018 during the 2019 fiscal year, and deferred $283,000, bringing the total revenue to $1.711 million. On the expenditure side, total expenses for the year were $1.536 million. Expenses have increased due to increased funding. Typically with a not-for-profit organization, expenditures and revenues match each other. So as funding comes in and is expended, we recognize the revenue and we also record the expenses on the income statement. Key areas of expenditures include professional fees, which include facilitator costs, professional fees for consulting, including $110,000 expended on consulting related to missing and murdered women, $243,000 paid to Spruce Creative, and $60,000 for the Cloud Case program. Rent has increased a little bit over the previous year due to 2 new lease agreements that have been signed, increasing rent expenditures to $60,000 a year. Salaries for the year were $250,000 compared to $99,000 last year. This is really due to 2 more staff members being hired on a full-time basis, as well as some temporary staff during the year, as funding was available for various programs. LFMO had a net income for the year of $174,951 compared to $20,000 last year, a substantial increase which represents an increase in the funding and controls over the expenditures, bringing the net assets to $187,109 at year end. The third statement is called the Statement of Cash Flows, is a reconciliation of opening and closing cash. Really the key items on this statement are the 2 bottom lines. Cash at the end of the year was $225,000 compared to $671,000 at the beginning of the year. This means that a lot of the cash that was received and deferred in the 2018 fiscal year was expended on programs this year, so it was an outflow of cash. It's not necessarily negative when the cash balance goes down if you had the funding available for programs and spent it on the programs that were planned to be spent upon. So a lot of that was expenditures of previously received funding on current year programs. The notes to the financial statements follow. I've never been at a meeting where everyone wants me to read several pages of notes in any detail, so I'll just kind of comment briefly on a couple. Note number 4 discusses some of the deferred revenue items with respect to funding received and expended. Note I believe it's note 8 gives details with respect to the rental commitments over the next 5-year period. Because of the new lease agreements, the organization is committed to spend upwards of $60,000 on rent over the next few years, with leases expiring in the 2023 fiscal year. Okay. Following the notes to the financial statements, and I'll scroll down here, I'll just take a minute, are several schedules with respect to various programs or departments within the organization. Schedule 1 is basic organizational capacity, which had a net loss for the year of $982. Schedule 2 is enhanced capacity funding, of which $279,000 was received for enhanced capacity funding, and expenditures related to the program were $253,000 plus an administration charge of $27,000. Schedule 3 relates to missing and murdered women programming. $180,000 was received in revenue, and $154,000 was expended on programs this year, as well as $26,000 on administration charges. Schedule 4 is the Rights and Reconciliation Framework, of which $50,000 was received in funding, and $50,379 was expended, including $5,984 on its administration. Schedule 5 is the Women's Advisory Programs, of which $73,000 was recognized as funding this year, and $73,000 was expended on programming. Schedule 6 is Gender-Based Analysis, of which $15,000 was received in funding and was expended on programming during the current year. Schedule 7 is the status of women programming. $102,000 was received and recognized this year, and $78,000 was spent in direct expenses, and $23,866 on administration charges. So the total $102,000 was expended on this programming in the current year. And Schedule 8 is a Gender-Based Analysis Networking Toolkit. $200,000 was received in funding, $189,590 was expended, including $25,000 of administration charges. Schedule 9, released to Department of Justice, $73,000 was recognized as revenue and $70,000 was expended during the course of the year. Schedule 10 is Early Learning and Child Care Center programming. $100,000 was recognized as revenue this year, and $100,000 was expended, including $9,000 of administration expenses. Schedule 11 relates to She is Indigenous program. $387,000 was recognized as revenue, and $387,000 was expended on the programming this year, including $243,000 of consulting fees, $72,000 of travel, administration, and accommodation, $30,000 of salaries, and $38,000 of admin. And finally, Schedule 12 is general operations, of which there was $1,900 of revenue recognized, $203,000 of what are administration charges. This is the cost of running all the other programs being charged back to general operations, and bringing the net excess of revenue over expenses to $185,000. Schedule 13 is the Gladue case. $20,000 was brought in as revenue this year, and $60,000 was expended mostly on consulting fees. Schedule 14 is Women and Gender Equality. $6,000 was recognized as revenue, and $6,000 was spent on expenditures related to that programming in the current year. There was no revenue or expenditures related to the Empowering Métis Women program in the current year. And that's the final schedule. I will, I guess, open the floor to questions for myself or Anita, if there are any questions.
June Smart, Métis Nation of Ontario. Just on your Schedule 12, transfer to Gladue case program, could you please spell her name proper? Thank you.
No, we'll get that fixed up.
Cora Bunn from Métis Nation of Ontario on Schedule 10, which is the Early Learning and Childcare. I see that there's only two expenses. One is $75,000 in travel and $15,000 in videography. Can we explain the $75,684 in travel, accommodations, meals, and facility, what that was for?
So I'm just going to, only because I'm trying to figure out too, at what point do I not take away from Melanie's report, because a lot of this is some of the projects that we worked on this past year, and so I'm trying to make sure that I'm not taking away her thunder when she does her report. So I'm going to refer this to Melanie to answer that question, and then we can bring it back. Melanie?
So to let you know that number one, the funding was money that we received for early childhood learning and childcare through the governing members. They gave us $100,000 a year to work. And what we did was, and some of you would have attended, this was part of the resources that we used to bring women together in a social policy forum in March to Ottawa, where we had conversations and discussions about moving forward on early childhood learning and childcare and the priorities around that, along with a whole host of other things. So that was for the videography of that event, and the travel was bringing delegates from across the homeland to Ottawa.
Okay, next is Francis, and it will be Pearl.
Francis Chartres in Manitoba. On page 2, it says revenue for $100,000 from MNC. Is that core revenue just for salaries?
My understanding is, so you're talking about the statement of operations and changes in net assets?
Yes.
So my understanding is that $100,000 was the commitment that MNC had made as part of the core for LFMO.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
That was just the $100,000 that I just talked about from ELCC.
Okay.
Last year, just to let you know, there wasn't enough time for ESDC to create a funding relationship with LFMO directly. So they gave the money to MNC to then transfer to us for early childhood learning. Next year, the money will come from ESDC directly to us and won't come through MNC.
Thank you.
So one of the things, just to add to that, is what we're trying to do, and it's been a work in progress, and I think we're almost to that point of succeeding, is that we're trying to do our own bookkeeping, I'll say, and our own accounting, and maintain our own finances. There is still slightly some reliance on MNC at this point, but we're slowly moving away from that to the point that we're actually looking at changing our banks too, so that we have a little bit better banking relationship with, currently we bank with Peace Hills Trust, and so we're finding it somewhat difficult in terms of the services and the accommodation, I'll say, that we're getting from that bank. And so we're going to be looking at not so much a call out, but doing some searches with respect to some banks, and how do we, what would we get back in return for the businesses that we'd bring to that bank. And so that's some of the background work that we're going to be looking at doing in the next little while, because I think it's important that as a national Métis women's organization is that we stand on our own. And as my good friend Frances said, her mom always told her, carry your own wallet. And so we're looking at carrying our own wallet from now on. So.
Okay, Pearl.
Pearl Gabona, Ontario. My question was addressed. I was simply concerned about the spelling of Gladue. Thank you.
Alicia.
Alicia Fernando, BC. If you could remind us just briefly about the two lease agreements, just what they entail and why they kind of go up and down year to year.
I'm sorry, I didn't even hear what you said. It's harder up here to hear than when we're sitting around the table.
Okay.
Sorry.
I was just wondering a brief what the two lease agreements entail, just because they're different each year, and just why that is.
Go ahead.
So when we first started, and we didn't have any office space, and we got our first office, it was a small little space on the third floor in a building right next door to MNC, and it just was really two small offices in a boardroom. But as we received more funding and as we needed more staff, we then took on almost 3 times what we started out as. So that it ended up being, and it's kind of 2 landlords that, I mean, it's all adjoining spaces, but it's 2 different landlords. So we've now got a much larger space, and that's why the lease amounts have changed and why there's 2.
Any other questions?
Just to add, everybody's welcome to come visit our offices. They're really nice.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you. Sharon Cadeau from Ontario. This is a question for the auditor, and I think that I just want to confirm that in the Incorporations Act, should we not be having an audit committee that then, before you start the audit and when you're working on it, that you should be reporting to them? I'm just inquiring about that.
All right, just getting some background here. By way of background, I'm from the Calgary office, so I'm kind of filling in, so I just wanted to make sure I understood the clarification. Typically within, I'll kind of give a general case as how organizations are governed. Typically there would be a finance committee or an audit committee or audit risk, some permutation of that name within an organization. Oftentimes as auditors, that committee will request to meet with us previous to the audit and we talk about the audit plan as to what we plan on conducting as audit tests over the course of the year, as well as what the committee sees as risks that we should maybe pay some attention to over the course of the audit to make sure we're addressing. That can be, depending on the type of organization and the size of the organization, a formal process where it's a sit-down meeting. It can be a discussion had in, kind of by phone call or conference call. Every organization handles that a little bit differently. Obviously, as an organization grows and is interested in putting in place governance policies and procedures, that is one of the steps that is, I think, critical. The second step is the follow-up meeting, which I know happened last night with the board and the auditor to discuss the results of the audit as well as the findings. And that's, I think, an even more important process to ensure that as auditors, we're able to chat with the people that are directly responsible for the financial reporting and have a full and free discourse with respect to the audit. So I hope that answers your question.
I already knew the answer. I just wanted you to say it, because I think it's important that that's what we need to do going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Melanie?
So let me just add to that, because the difficulty, so in my other life, the other work that I do, I am the Minister of Finance and Human Resources for the Manitoba Métis Federation. And part of my responsibility is I have a finance committee. The difficulty is where we draw the finance committee from here, and so to me that work is going to go to that board. When I talked earlier about finance policies and processes that have to be developed and accepted, that's the work of that board that will be doing that. I think it's the responsibility of that board to with the technicians that we now have, to be able to develop those policies and processes around finances, because one of the things that we have never talked about is our risk management. And risk management is an important piece for me because I put myself out there as one of the board of directors of LFMO in terms of my personal value, my personal assets, if we do things that are outside the scope of our own due diligence. And so for me, the board at this point, because we are only 5 of us that are, and Melanie, of course, but and the staff. So, I mean, I think we have a small group to kind of do that work that's already, that's required to be there. I know that auditors don't normally, it's not written in their rules that you have to do this. It's one of those things that they strongly encourage people to do that. And so part of that audit review would be the responsibility of that finance committee. So, and that was one of the things that I had mentioned earlier. Melanie?
I also want to make it clear, these are policy things which are not contained in any act from Industry Canada at all.
Okay, I just want to beg to differ because it is in the Corporations Act that you need to have a Finance and Audit Committee.
Okay. It's something that we're working on though, Sharon, and you'll be part of that because you sit on the board of LFMO. So, are there any other questions?
Francis?
No more from Francis?
First of all, I just wanted to say I recognize your shoes and I liked them this morning, Miss Anita Campbell, and I'd like to make a motion to accept the financial audit as presented.
Thank you, Francis. Seconder? Adrian Carrier, Manitoba. I'll second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor of this motion? Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion is carried unanimously.
So I want to thank you very much for that. I also just want to make a couple closing remarks. I want to thank James for coming in today on a Saturday to spend time with all these beautiful Métis women in this room. I think he was a little bit intimidated at first, but I think he's better now. I also want to remind the delegation that there are things that we're working on, and the unfortunate thing is that we're already, 6 months, 7 months into our new fiscal year for 1920, and so half the work has already been done that we'll be reporting on again for next year. It is something, I mean, when you look at the amount of projects, and that was part of what we discussed yesterday, was the amount of projects and the amount of work that has been done in a short period of time. Because when you think about it, a year seems like a long time, but it actually isn't really in terms of the amount of work that we're all trying to do, whether it's in this work life or the other work lives that we all have. And then, of course, trying to have a personal life with our families and our grandchildren and our children and so on. So I just really want to remind everyone that we now have some staff. We have office space. We're trying to carry our own wallets, and we're also trying to ensure that we have the capacity and the support to be able to continue doing the work that you're allowing us to do. So with that, I want to thank you. I think I've covered off everything, so I want to thank you very much for that. And with that, I'll close with making a motion to appoint Myers Norris Penny for the 1920 fiscal year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita. Second.
Francis Chartrand, I'll second that motion.
Any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Abstentions? Carried unanimously.
Thank you very much, Anita and our auditor. I'd like to give them another round of applause for coming up and explaining that to us. Okay, so now this brings us, I would like to invite Victoria Pruden to come up and provide a short presentation on lateral kindness for us all. Let's give her a warm welcome.
So while we're waiting for the IT to get set up, we have a special co-presenter with us today, and it's a member of our delegation from British Columbia. I'd like to introduce Myrna McCallum, who's now on the other side of the IT specialist here. Now, Myrna's Métis ancestry hails from Green Lake, Saskatchewan, but we have the pleasure of having her in British Columbia with us now. And Myrna McCallum has, she's a lawyer, and she has a specialty, which is of really particular interest to us. She specializes in trauma-informed law. So trauma-informed law practice, trauma-informed investigations, justice processes, and she's involved in a really special training program in British Columbia that I'm also a part of, which is called Creating Safer Communities, which is led by Ending Violence Association of British Columbia. And in Creating Safer Communities, it's training for Indigenous women leaders, Métis, First Nations, Inuit women leaders about how to educate and transform policies in Indigenous organizations and workplaces, especially around addressing concerns of lateral violence, bullying, harassment, and sexual assault. So I'm really delighted that Myrna agreed to co-present today. She's got a vast wealth of experience. So I'm going to start off the presentation, and then Myrna's going to take over, and then we can close together with any questions. Okay, so to get the presentation going, I just hit, oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to do a quick reminder of some of the goals. Women of the Métis Nation and LFMO AGM has been very supportive in promoting an approach which reminds us of our shared values and promoting lateral kindness, trying to reduce and minimize the impacts of lateral violence. So just reminding us that we're going to aim for strength-based approaches with each other, reminding ourselves and everyone that each one of us has something valuable to contribute, and that ultimately we all do have shared values and goals. Promoting assertive communication, minimizing aggressive or passive-aggressive communication, promoting open listening, understanding, respect, empathy, and a sense of belonging, using lateral kindness to eliminate lateral violence, cultivating a compassionate versus a competitive or adversarial mindset, using lateral kindness principles to change and transform the way we lead, promote unity and shared leadership, and change the environment of our politics. So, I already took a moment to introduce Myrna to you. She does a lot of advocacy, training, curriculum development, research, writing, and I'm going to hand it over to Myrna. Please help me welcome her.
All right. Okay, thank you, Victoria, for that introduction. I'm really happy to be here, and so I always mess up with PowerPoints because I am not tech savvy, so be patient with me if I skip through something. So what is lateral violence? Although it's found everywhere, lateral violence in this case refers to its impacts in our own Métis communities. Unlike workplace bullying, lateral violence differs in that Métis and other Indigenous peoples are now abusing their own people in similar ways that they have been abused. I think one of the ways we might commonly have been exposed to this concept is through the phrase internalized oppression, where the oppressor becomes, or the oppressed becomes the oppressor. It's a cycle of abuse, and its roots lie in factors such as colonization, oppression, intergenerational trauma, and the ongoing experiences of racism, exclusion, and discrimination. Yes. So recognizing lateral violence, how would you know it when it shows up? Some of the ways that I've identified lateral violence is through silencing, so like taking up space. Within the context of workplace, within workplace meetings, it's like taking up space in a meeting so as to limit the input of others. Dismissing, which is ignoring or minimizing the points of others. Disrespecting, sighing, walking out, ignoring, rolling eyes, belittling, gossiping. Discouraging, shutting down a suggestion or idea without discussion, and denying, invalidating the experience of others. There are many, many other ways that lateral violence can show up, but these are commonly the ways that you would see it show up in a workplace. I respectfully agree to disagree. I really love this phrase, and I think I learned it in law school. It taught me to not take things personally, especially if you're in a courtroom. I used to be a Crown prosecutor, and sometimes I would take the arguments of opposing counsel seriously. So learning this phrase, I respectfully agree to disagree, really helped me remove my own personal emotions from what it was we were discussing. And neutralize the entire experience so that we could move forward and come to sometimes an agreement that was beneficial to both parties. So the way we communicate with each other matters. It can build or break relationships. Your approach conveys one of the following: either I respect your opinion or I don't care what you think. We don't have to agree with each other, but we must respect each other. Respect requires patience, understanding, compassion, thoughtful response, and a willingness to hear the opinions of others. Agreeing to disagree creates an opportunity for critical discussion, respectful debate, and the creation of safe space for diverse viewpoints. Respectful disagreement offers an opportunity for growth and progress. Within the workplace, I think this approach is incredibly critical to allow for various opinions, viewpoints, and lived experience to be afforded the space, the time, and the respect to be vocalized and to be recognized so that folks can understand where people are coming from and find a way to embrace all of that while they move forward and find a new way forward. So respectful communication to progress and accomplish things collectively. An approach of respect, empathy, and assertive and kind communication can help us all get things done in a strength-based and trauma-informed way. I mean, I think you can't underscore enough how important it is for us to all have respect when we come into a meeting and respect each other, because I would say, in my experience, for those of us who go into helping professions or social justice work or nonprofit work, we do it because we love the cause, we love the people, we love our communities, we want to raise ourselves up, we want to raise each other up, and sometimes because of things like that god-awful intergenerational trauma, like the devastation we've experienced as a result of day schools and Indian residential schools, the addictions and the sexual abuse and all the harm that flowed from that, it's so easy to internalize that and bring your pain into the workplace and not know how to balance, because as we're growing, I mean, I'm 46, but I'm still learning all the time to overcome things that I was taught by my grandmother and my kukum and my tapan, that I know they taught me out of love, but also out of ignorance and what it was that they were taught, which may not have been healthy. So we're always learning. So the principles of lateral kindness. Oh, I like that little bounce. Positive reinforcement. So good decisions, outcomes, and impacts are celebrated. Recognition. Successes are recognized and supported. Reciprocity, always giving back to one another. Focus on the good. Emphasis should always be on the positive and on possibility. Encouragement. Validation is readily offered along with approval to continue moving in a positive direction, and minimizing negativity. Little to no emphasis on negative feedback or outcomes. I mean, I can't emphasize the piece on validation enough, because I find when you approach someone who has maybe caused harm or made a mistake, and you emphasize encouragement and validation, it will inspire that person to try again and bring forth like their best self, versus the alternative, which can trigger shame and trauma and pain in someone and either cause them to react in a way that's hostile or combative, or worse, they just leave. They leave the organization feeling shamed or excluded. So how can we celebrate and encourage positive behavior? Lateral kindness celebrates positive behaviors in others, even small ones. So being strengths-based, we must ask, what is good? What is working? How can we support this idea, person, effort, and initiative? And if we approach our communications in this way, I mean, only good is going to flow. We have to believe in each other and in our collective ability to change and grow. As I said previously, we're always learning. And I mean, it's okay to make mistakes. I think it's okay to cause some pain if it's out of ignorance and just not knowing better. But like, as we know better, we do better, to quote Oprah and Brené Brown and all those folks. Emphasis on empathy, compassion, caring, recognize the expertise, the wisdom, and the love among our peers, listen with an open mind and an open heart, and recognize and respect the vulnerability in others. As we all know, it takes a lot of courage to step up and to use your voice, and to participate, particularly in difficult conversations, and reinforce respectful communication through recognition and validation. So I love these little word bubbles, or whatever they're called. I didn't come up with this, Victoria did. But that's essentially, I believe, the end of our presentation. And so I see Victoria running away. Any questions? Yes, over there.
Suzanne Jackson, Ontario. Just to clarify, this presentation will be a part of our memory stick?
Absolutely, we can make it a part of our memory stick, yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments? just want to sash Myrna while we're up here again, and we've got the full-sized Sashing Our Warriors sash, which is part of a campaign in British Columbia that was initiated with the Métis Youth of British Columbia and the Métis Women of British Columbia, and we have our chair of Métis Youth, Cassidy Caron, sitting right in the front, our co-chair. And I just want to present this to Myrna. She's a real warrior in British Columbia for informing and improving the lives of our people and other Indigenous people. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you, Victoria and Myrna, for that presentation. I think it's very timely to have that conversation as we are here in our business meeting and having potentially difficult conversations as we try to move the Métis women of, no, not British Columbia, the Métis women forward in our nation. So we are making really great time with our agenda. So at this point, I'm going to call up Anita. Oh, Francis has a question.
Thank you. They moved quickly across the room, and this question's for Victoria. So I'll just wait till she's finished. Where is she? Yeah, it's regarding the presentation.
Victoria.
Okay. So first of all, I want to start off by thanking you for the presentation, and I also want to thank Myrna for a presentation. However, I attended a meeting in BC about 3 weeks ago, I think that was 3 weeks ago. And if you talk about lateral violence, you've seen lateral violence right all over the place there. So I'm just wondering, like the last comment that Myrna made when she says recognize and respect the vulnerability, it takes courage to set up and use your voice. So I'm just wondering why nobody stepped up to help the president of MNBC when they were attacking her at her own assembly. And then there was a comment that one of the ladies made there to the chair, and she said to the chair, let him speak, he's speaking for me. Because I think that we're strong enough that we should speak for ourselves. And if we're doing presentations and we're walking across the Métis Nation, I think that we should always respect our leaders and respect what they're doing. So I'm just wondering, like, what's the plan on helping her when she's attacked like that next time? That's BC. If that happened to our president, our spokesperson in Manitoba, we'd be at the mic. So I was just wondering what kind of plan BC would have if they're witnessing that lateral violence against their leader again.
Right. Thank you very much, Francis. And I'll start off a response, and I would encourage any of my provincial council to jump in. And I don't want to be presumptuous. I need to primarily respect my own agency and my own safety in responding. We're engaging in a process which has been made public in British Columbia to address a number of the concerns around division, disrespect, power, balance, and imbalance. And I would anticipate, as the board has made a commitment, a number of our community leaders have made a commitment to working with a specialist in organizational repair, undertaking some changes in terms of our governance, addressing complications and complex situations around our board dynamics and community dynamics. And I believe that our entire board has made a commitment to work on addressing those issues and improving the functioning within our nation as an organization, within our board, and within community governance. I think I'm not being presumptuous when I say that our assembly was extremely difficult this year. A number of people expressed feeling unsafe.
And we do have some complex issues. Now, I can't speak for everyone's approach, feelings, that kind of thing, and I can only do what I feel safe doing in the moment. We had an opportunity prior to our AGM to do some presenting about trauma-informed practice and ways of being. We had an opportunity to try to impress upon people as we went into that AGM in terms of the kinds of principles and behaviors that we wanted to see. And the Métis Women of British Columbia brought on 4 elders, 2 women and 2 men, to try to help improve feelings of safety and a reminder of our traditional values. I'm only one person. I do have a council here with me. We know where we would like to get to. Are we there yet? No, we're not. I can only speak on behalf of myself and what I would like to try to move forward. Not everyone may agree with me. Not everyone may agree with what I'm putting out there. And we can only be responsible for our own actions and our own selves. We can try to improve things, but I can't make someone else do something. I couldn't force any one of my council members here to believe the same things that I do or practice the same things that I do. I think we're lucky, and I'll expand upon this in our presentation later. We've taken on some of those issues as a Provincial Women's Council, and we've worked through them, and we've gotten support to work through them, to work through conflict in healthy ways and try to repair relationships and have that commitment. Would we like to see that happen all throughout our nation? Yes, I think we probably would. But each member of my council can speak for themselves. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. And I wasn't trying to pinpoint.
Point of order, actually. I'm going to put a halt to all of this. What goes on in each of our assemblies, we've all been a part of, I've been a part of the Métis Nation for many, many decades. And I'm going to tell you there are challenging assemblies and non-challenging assemblies. There are chairs that go rogue. There are chairs that didn't manage the assembly well. I'm not here to discuss, debate, or try to deflect. I'm here as your president to ensure that we work in a healthy way together. Whatever happens at an MNBC assembly needs to be dealt with in MNBC. Whatever happens at an MNA assembly will be dealt with here in Alberta. And the same within Manitoba. So I welcome your presentation. I'm the one that asked you to make it. I want us to move forward at this table using lateral kindness. And I do work as your president on strength-based approaches to lift women up, not to find ways to drag them down. And I want us to continue on that path. Thank you.
I also want to thank them, Melanie, for their presentation. That's why I'm asking if it could have been done different and if they could have a discussion on it. Because by attending all these meetings when we go across the nation, we learn. And that's the first time I attended their meeting, so I wanted to ask, they're the experts. That's why you hire people to come do presentations for us. They're the experts, and some of them do that on their day-to-day jobs. So if I could learn from BC, I want to thank them very much. So I think that point of order was wrong. It was just discussion on how it works and how we move forward. So if anything like that happened in my region, Saskatchewan or their region, if these are the experts that you hired, then they should be able to let us know what we should do and how we could move forward. Because I agree with it 100% that it is wrong for any man to speak for any woman, and lateral violence is all over. You just heard the presentation. So I think by you saying that it's their business, or their business, it's our business as a Métis Nation woman organization across the nation that we get this information not only here, but across the nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that discussion. So next we are going to invite up spokeswoman Anita Campbell to provide us with an update from the bylaw committee. Are you ready?
Would you like a break first? Pardon? What?
Do you need a few moments to get ready, or are you good?
No.
You're good.
So, I don't know. I don't know if anybody else is sitting here. Oh, sorry, Anita Campbell, Manitoba. Do you want me to go? I don't want to have to go up there. I can just sit here. Oh, it's hot up there. It's either that or I was flashing, one of the two, which is fine. I was just sitting here thinking, you always do reflection when you have these kind of workshops and stuff, or you have these kind of presentations, and you do reflection, right, in terms of how you are. And I was remembering the Elder's Prayer this morning and yesterday, and I always try to pick on something that they've said, like one word will come out, and it'll stay with me for most of the days that I'm in that either assembly or conference or meeting or something. And it was actually a word that we've used in our own meetings, in our own assemblies, and that's the respect. And I think we don't use that enough, and I think it's something we take for granted. And sometimes we try to walk the talk, and sometimes we forget to walk that talk, right? And so I think it's a good reminder. We each have our own gifts, we each have our own strengths, and we each have our own experiences throughout our day. And so I think it's that reminder of respect and not to take things personal. And it's always been a thing for me. Sometimes I unintentionally offend people that I don't mean to do it. That's just the person I am. I sometimes just state things, and sometimes you don't realize that effect that you have on individuals. Sometimes you say things and people remember, and you don't even remember saying it. And so I think for me, the whole lateral violence is something as a good reminder. We had it last year, and again this year. I was wondering why we're having it again, but I think it's a good reminder, and I think it's something that we, maybe should incorporate as part of, if not a presentation, but at least having that information in our kits for women to reflect on and have when they go home, and they have their own work and their meetings with their own women to do. Because you have to remember, there's a lot of women back home that are not sitting here. And I think that's why it's important for us to remember that whatever we have here, we go back home and share. It doesn't just stop here. And so for me, we have to remember that respect is, you might not like me as an individual, but at least respect my position. And I've always asked people to do that, you might not respect me, Anita Campbell, but at least respect my position. And that's what I always try to do with people, is I might not like them as a person, but I'm trying to respect their position and the work that they're doing to advance and move our voices forward. So I just want to thank you for that. I just wanted to mention that sometimes we tend to forget those things. And just as a reminder, lateral violence is everywhere. And it's something I think that we have to always keep in mind. And I want to thank the elder for the wise words that you gave us this morning and yesterday. So thank you very much. The bylaws, you should fire me.
You can't fire slaves.
The only difference is you can't fire a slave, so.
Or a volunteer.
So, as I'm reading the minutes from last year, and I'm being 100% honest, if anybody else wants to tackle this, I'm more than willing to hand this over. I know last year we had mentioned that we were going to present, the board was going to work on the bylaws and bring something back in terms of drafts. Well, our board has had some difficulty in terms of meeting. We've tried, and I think the bylaws just kept one of those things that you keep shoving back and saying, we'll get to it, we'll get to it. Well, we're here again, and we haven't gotten to it. And so part of what we're trying to figure out, and I think those women that read, and June, I apologize, I think it was June that read them, right? Yes. She said it was really good bylaws. And I said, we didn't do anything to them. She said, I read them all. She said, they're pretty good. I said, well, they're old, but yeah. So I thank June. Thank you so much, June, for reading the old bylaws. I do appreciate it. But we haven't had the chance to get together yet to do that work. I think sometimes I take on a little bit more than I think I can handle. And I'm not trying to make excuses. Last year was a pretty hard year for me. I lost my sister in November, and so that kind of threw things off. I was trying to tell myself I wasn't going to get upset this morning. I always do that. There's two people I talk about, and I'll always have tears. And my wise Métis sister over there told me because I carry them in my heart, but, and it's not something that I'm trying to make you feel sorry for me so you don't fire my slaveness. But so I lost her. Then I got married last year in June, and my fiance at the time had a heart attack in March, and so hence why I wasn't able to go to the forum that was held. I heard great stuff about it, and I seen the great pictures and the reports that came out of it, and so it's just been a really not great year. And in the meantime, I'm reworking and revising and rewriting 4 other bylaws for 4 different corporations on top of the other work that I've done in my daily work. So the good thing is that those 4 bylaws were for 4 different organizations with, had been accepted by their board, and so now they're happy. We're not. And so I apologize for that. But I think part of the difficulty is that sometimes, you know how you think you work better alone and you can get things done easier. I think somebody said that the other day. You know, training people to do stuff is a little bit more difficult, but I think that empowerment and that education and that sharing of knowledge is an important way for us to have people that are coming, you know, behind us or whatnot, be able to take care of us and be able to make those decisions that we want them to make when they're sitting around this table. So those are all the excuses that I have. Again, I'm more than willing to give this up if anybody wants to take it on. The bad thing is I like bylaws. I really do enjoy writing them. I enjoy the research. I enjoy the dialogue that comes with it. And so I've told Melanie in our conversation my plan, and I'm not sure if, it's, I think, something that the board needs to talk about, and we've identified that we're going to have a meeting soon, and it's not going to be like soon in like next June, but soon, where we're going to commit to having a meeting to look at those bylaws. I've committed to, because we started making some of those changes already, and so I have like a half of a bylaw, I'll say, because I did start the work, I just wasn't able to finish it, and so I did commit to having those bylaws from that point on. I'll present them to the board. We'll finish the bylaws off. I'd really like to get the bylaws out to the assembly, to the members, way ahead of time of the assembly so that you have the opportunity to really read them, and we can actually schedule a day. I think we're still on the same plan, Melanie, to schedule a full day at next year's assembly, if need be, to discuss the new bylaws. And I think it's important that we set that time aside, even if you don't have a lot of questions or those kind of things. I think it's fair for us to try to make sure that we have that appropriate amount of time on the agenda to discuss our bylaws, because there's going to be an understanding that has to be shared there with everyone in terms of how we got to what we're presenting on that document. So I do have half of a revised document. Again, I want to thank the women that have put their names forward for that committee. Trying to set up the committee meetings were somewhat difficult, as I explained last year. But I do want to thank the women that have put their names forward to do that with me for last year. So I'm not sure at this point what the assembly would like, but I am recommending that we continue on with the work that we had put forward already last year and the recommendation that was put forward for last year, and have a bylaw, draft bylaw presented to you for next year. So I'm open to questions.
Melanie?
So I'd like to make a motion that we table the bylaw report and do the action items that Anita has just laid out in her, and we will, as a board, bring it forward and make sure that you, number one, have the revised proposed bylaws prior to the AGA so you can review them, look at them, discuss them, slash them, do whatever you want. And we'll spend one full day next year going over them and getting our bylaws approved. And actually, to help support Anita, I'm going to let her pass over to our staff what she's already done, because there was amazing work that was done. I was on a lot of the calls and stuff, and I think that it's not going to be as strenuous as we might have thought it would be. And it at least gives us a very good launch pad to get off of so that we can present bylaws back to our assembly next year. So that's my motion.
Adrian Carrier, Manitoba, I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, is there any discussion on this motion? Go ahead, Alicia.
Alicia Fernando, BC. I just wanted to ask if the Electoral Act would be included in, not Act, but electoral bylaws be included in that review? Or as per the resolution last year? The rules around elections and stuff. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Nope. Okay, then we'll go into voting. All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Anita.
Just thank you so much for this. One of the things I do want to, because yesterday, remember, we had the conversation about definition, right? So those are the kind of things, and I think that's why it's important to have the full day, because we're going to have those conversations at this table, where we're gonna present you with what we recommend. But again, we might not have all the answers for some of those areas that are kind of, I'll say, gray, in a sense of what the exact wording of those definitions should be. And so that's why we're recommending that we have a full day. It's not the technical pieces of meeting Industry Canada's requirements with respect to what we have to put in there, but basically it's the definitions, and it's those feely, touchy, I'll say, hard things that sometimes end up in a bylaw. And then we're going to try to make sure that none of the administration and those kind of things are in there, but we're focusing on our governance. And so those are some of the things that we'll bring forward for next year. So thank you very much for that. Again, you could have fired me. I would have been okay with it. But I thank you for allowing me to finish the document that we started working on. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that, you guys. So we kind of are a little ahead of schedule, so I've got a insert here right now to do. So I have a young woman that's been crying to me for 2 years because she has no sash. She's a sashless child. So I am going to give her her own sash today so that she can proudly run around. She only has her baby sash that her daddy bought her when she was a little girl. So now she's going to have a woman's sash to walk around with. And not to forget my other youth, she has one too. So I had been asked, I want to talk about the sashes for a minute. I had been asked earlier if we're going to sell them. And my amazing Métis sister, Anita, she, in her process for her sashes, she doesn't sell sashes and she doesn't give them away at request. She tells people that they're earned. And we know that these sashes, we've had them made, they were designed by us, for us, and we've had them made, and they know that they can't ever create this sash and sell it. And so I apologize to all those women that want these sashes, but you will get one because you're going to earn it. One day it's going to be on you because it meant something and you worked to get it and it became yours because of that. So I hope everybody ends up getting sashes, but for the time being, these are not going to be given away or sold like that. They are only going to be given to those that have earned the ability to be able to wear them. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Melanie. This is a great honor. And yes, my last sash was actually made by my grandfather. And it's a very tiny baby sash, so this is lovely, and I will wear it with pride. With that being said, we're going to have an early lunch, so you guys can break until 1, so it's a very long lunch. If you guys wanted to maybe come back about 10 to 1, just so that we can make sure we're ready to start on time, that would be great. Thank you, everyone. And the youth and the resolution committee, don't forget to meet.
Where's the resolution committee meeting?
In the back. Yes.
So are we coming back here at 12:45?
Yeah, 10 to, just to make sure that we can get started on time so we're not trickling in after.
Yeah, because we're going to be here all day and then we're going into 5 o'clock. So if we work through everything faster. Okay. So can we come back at 12:30 or something?
Yeah, okay, be back by 12:30, please.
Thank you.
With the anticipation, we'll be for sure started by 12:45.